Do you realize how dependent we are on technology today? You just look around. We can't do anything without a cell phone in our pocket. He can use that thing to do a dozen things. My daughter teaches a professor at the University of North Florida, and she teaches from one of those things. She'll be here next week, but she'll still be teaching from here on that cell phone. And the computers that we have today are an essential household item. You don't need a history book anymore. You Google it. You just Google it, and you can find out anything you want to know. Some of this stuff I've got here, I found on Google. And to think back 150 years ago, what man had to do to communicate one with the other, I find it interesting. Perhaps you don't. But that is basically what the presentation is about tonight, the communication that has taken place in pioneer days. I want to introduce you to the book that I published, and it is an example of our technology. Early Day Schools of Major County, Oklahoma is a culmination of my research from county records of Major and Woods County going back to 1894. We have a nice little museum at the Historical Society that the retired teachers assembled. We had an occasion at the library one day for a family to come in researching on their family history. And what's wrong?
Let me just get new batteries in.
Okay, I don't need it anyhow. The family went with me out to the Historical Society, and as we were going through their records, I noted that they were loose leaf notebooks, and I discovered that somebody had opened the book, changed the pages, and some of the information was moved. Of the 104 schools in Major County, several of them were named the same way. There's 2 Independence, 3 Pleasant Valley, and those pages get mixed. And I thought, I want to publish a book. This is an opportunity. So I published this book. It took me 2 years handwriting all of the information on pieces of paper. Then I typed it on Word on my computer. I couldn't go with it anywhere. My lovely wife put it on a flash drive and sent the flash drive to my daughter in Florida. And she screened it and made some changes in it and sent it back. I took the flash drive to George Williams in the library. I'm going to say George spent a couple of days, but he didn't spend it all at one time. But from time to time, as he was able, he worked on that flash drive, putting it on PDF. And then we went on lulu.com He went through, gave the password, set up the information of what color to make the book, hardbound, how many pages, how many copies, pushed a button. 2 weeks later, I had a book. That's all there was to it. Isn't that amazing? If I had to write that out in longhand so you could read it, would take a long time. So I want to go back and tell you what it was like to have to do it that way. Take a long time.
Is that book for sale? Can I buy one?
I don't have any more. They're all sold, but I probably could order some. Alva wants some. There's a woman in Kansas State University wants one, and a lady over at Ringwood wants one. So I can order some. The thing I want to do tonight is try to give credit to the man that made this possible with all the information about all schools. There are 104 schools listed in here, telling about their origination and who the teachers were from 1894 down to the time the schools were consolidated. I don't know whether you've ever wondered or not, but I always wondered why, when we had the run, we had to go to Alva. What was there about Alva that was so special? Where were they? How did they exist? Fairview was 4 men, say 4 quarters of land right here in the corner of town, and that was all we had. But Alva was Alva. Okay. Where'd you go, George? I want slide number 1. If I could direct your attention, there is a railroad running from Kiowa, Kansas, down across the Canadian Texas. In 1887, the Southern Kansas Railway extended from a point in Kansas now known as Harper down across this area, which was the Cherokee outlet owned by the Cherokee Indians and was being utilized by cattle herders bringing cattle from Texas to the Kansas market. Southern Kansas came out of Kansas City to get down in this part of the country and intercept those herds and get them shipped to market faster. You know, it was a commercial thing. Now, by circumstance, it was necessary to have a depot at a certain point. And so they put a depot on that railroad, which was nothing more than a little wooden shack with a telegraph machine in it. And there was a water tank and a bin for coal for the engines to stop. The attorney for the Southern Kansas Railway was a man by the name of Alva Adams. So, what did he do? He called it the Alva Depot. Now we have a name. And the railroad functioned for 6 years across that outlet where there was nothing but cattle herds. Just imagine those railroaders coming through here. Now there were also people coming from Kansas cutting wood illegally, hauling it to Kansas. Whether they hauled it on the railroad or not, I haven't found any statement to that effect, but it's logical. There were also people cutting hay and taking it to Kansas. Those people are the forerunners of the Sooners, who were squatters before the run of September 16, 1893. But what I'm saying is that over a period of 6 years, there were a lot of people that were in the outlet, snooping around and looking. Alva Depot was a good spot. The railroad company was able to convince the government to include that as a land office, one of 4 land offices for the whole Cherokee outlet. And there were people that had come in and seen and knew the potential that if this were a land office, it's a good place for a town. They drew up the plat, filed the plat with the U.S. government, and had the plat laid out, and they marked lots in town for the settlement. All that took place before September 16, 1893. And on September 16, 1893, the man that ran the post office, and I've forgotten his name now, came in and brought lumber and was ready to build a post office on September the 16th, 1893. Now, the government had also laid this out into counties, and what we have surrounding our area was named M County. M County had 2,784, could I have number 2 there? 2,784 acres. 48 miles from top to bottom. No, 48 miles across and 58 miles from top to bottom. That area is a third larger than the state of Rhode Island. Look at all the little squares in there. Every one of those is 1 mile. 1 mile. 2,784 of them. And every mile is 4 quarters. The settlers stake a quarter. Now, you had 100,000 people lined up around the outlet for September the 16th, 1894. It was a hot, dry day. It was so hot, and this is a fact, the Cimarron River was dry until it got to where the Eagle Chief poured water into it. That was the kind of climate they were experiencing. Lord, to think they had some of this rain today, wouldn't they be blessed? Now, even though there were more people than quarter sections, there were many people who were disillusioned, or for one reason or another, they would get here, they would abandon a quarter. So only 60% of those quarters in the 2,784 miles were actually staked. So there were a lot of gaps in that area that were not settled. People trickled in, for a long time. The first newspaper in that area was Clio Springs. They got their paper in 1894. And in 1894, they made the statement, and they used that word, and I borrowed it. People were trickling southward through Clio, coming to Major County. I know of stories that there was some of the Mennonite groups. They came in, they got run off, they went back. Mr. Bays and Bud used to talk about it, his dad. her granddad. They came back later and stayed. So there was a trickling going on. What that means is you've got a change in the population, you've got a change in the location of the settlers, and that is a factor we have to consider as we go on into the thrust of the presentation. Now, the little town of Alva then, slide number 3. This is the eastern part, the original plat. And up at the top, you'll see the 2 railroads coming in, and one of them is marked Depot. So that's where the little Alva Depot was. The main square, you can see the courthouse right in the middle. They laid it out for that to be the courthouse, and then to the east was to be the post office. Now, in the block just to the, what I would say is the northeast of it, was the land office. Now, somehow the government brought the lumber in on the Southern Kansas Railway and had that land office built on September the 16th, 1893. There was no courthouse there. To the south was, where, if you could see the courthouse block, the block to the east, and in the upper left-hand corner of that is the Runny Mead Hotel. Go up to Alva sometime and go through it. It has been renovated. It is now a museum. It came from Runny Mead, Kansas. It was built in 1889 as the Hendrickson Hotel. In November of 1893, there was a land office and 3 or 4 tents in the depot, and about 100 people that were trying to establish some kind of a claim in the town of Alva. These people bought the hotel and moved it to Alva from Runny Mead, Kansas. And it is a big building. It was a monumental task. January 2nd of 1894, it opened for business. And it was the only real structure in Alva in 1894, less than 6 months after the first legal settler set claim. And it became the facility for all of your official business. Now, there was the post office built simultaneously, and the people held church right after the run. A Baptist preacher conducted church from the back of a wagon, and that's how crude facilities were. But this Runny Mead Hotel became a landmark, and the territorial governor appointed the officers for the county, M County. And in that, they appointed your regular officers and a county superintendent, H.L. Ross. The business of conducting official operation, I say, took place in the Runny Mead Hotel. No air conditioning. Mind you, this is just months after the run. No electricity. no air conditioning. It was in the wintertime, and we don't know the exact conditions of the wintertime. And later in 1894, in the spring, it did rain a little bit. Now, communication was limited to the telegraph on the Southern Kansas Railway and horseback. Horseback from wherever. There was no mail route set up. There was no way to reach from Alva down to Major County. There were no carriers. Clifford Bowers, one of the four settlers in Fairview, rode a horse, or he had a cart. Sometimes he had a cart. And he went to Homestead. That's where they did their business. That's where they picked up groceries. And if anybody had any mail, why, Clifford would take it to Homestead. Well, shortly after development of the Alva town, there was a meeting, and they wanted to have two mail routes. One to Enid by way of Pond Creek, and one to Enid by way of Cleo Springs. Now, I'm going to digress because I just had a thought. Well, if we could go back to number 2. This is something that I had just discovered and never knew before. I'm going to quote from the letter that was written in 1939. The opening act provided for 2 counties divided on a correction line north of Carmen. If you could, in the middle is a dark spot, right there. That's Carmen. That line across there is a dividing line. And what it is, it's a jog in the township line. It says, the north half being designated as M County with the land office located in Alva. The south half being designated as P County with the county seat named as Great Bend, located near the present town of Oriana. That was to be the county seat. I don't know who proposed that, but it says, as my map shows, that has been destroyed. There was a commission sent out from Enid to organize the town of Great Bend, but on account of high water in the Simmerman and Eagle Chief, they were unable to reach the location. He named the name of the committee. The commission decided the territory would not support 2 county governments and recommended that it all be thrown into one county with the county seat at Alva. The report was accepted and M County organized, and then it goes on by the appointment of the following officers, and that's when these officers were appointed. I really should have said at the beginning that my real purpose of doing this is to memorialize the man that created these schools, Dick Oxley. Is the name familiar? How many of you know the name? Have heard the name? You've heard it.
There was an Oxley that lived at Isabel, but just not too long.
The man at Isabel was a brother.
I don't know what his first name was.
Dick was from Cleo. And that brother came after Dick did. Dick Oxley was an extraordinary man. He was civic-minded. Of course, he was educated. He liked politics. But his work ethic is beyond description. Dick was born in Iowa. His father, William Titus Oxley, was a farmer. I think there were 9 kids. As a farmer, I guess that's all they had to do was have kids. But he grew up, got his education, and became a school teacher, married a school teacher. Then got the notion to join the settlement west, and he went to Kansas and established himself there. He found out Kansas had, at that time, 5,328 schools, 8,250 teachers, and he couldn't get a job. So he got with some other guys, and they decided to make the run. What he did to make the run is yet to be determined. But it connected with several men who were aware of the Cleo Springs area, which had water beyond description. It had a curing effect, and there were expectations to build hotels with the water for treatment, for people to come and get treatment at Cleo Springs. He grabbed a quarter section west of town. His quarter section goes from up on the hill in town down and across the Eagle Chief to the mile line west. He staked that quarter September the 16th, 1893. He came all that distance that day and staked that claim. He threw up some limbs over a pile of dirt and made a dugout and went to Alva to stake his claim at that land office in the northeast corner. Stumbled on to the Runny Mead Hotel people, went in and got a job as the assistant county superintendent. I don't know how he did it in the course of that time, but his political aspirations got him on the election board. So he was on the election board, and he filed for office for county superintendent for the coming term of January 1894. Was elected and became the new county superintendent. I thought he ran against Ross, but when I found the appointment list, I found out Ross became the clerk, the county clerk, and gave up as county superintendent. So Dick Oxley became the official M-County county superintendent as of January 1, 1894. Living, could I have the next picture, please? No, the next one. There. No, there. See what a suave guy he was? Cool. He wasn't just a farmer. A man of class. He was also very meticulous, if you'll notice his dress. Very well-dressed man. But he was a tough man. He lived a crude life. He didn't have his family with him yet. And he had a claim down on the, back to slide 2, please. Thank you. Thank you. Down on the Eagle Chief, north of the Cimarron River. And a job in Alva, 30 miles away. Went to work on horseback. Had to go north. We found Carmen, and then there's a little black spot to the west of it. That's Augusta. Augusta was there before Carmen. Carmen wasn't built till 1901 when the Orient Railroad came through. Augusta was already there. Augusta wanted to be the county seat. It just so happens that 1.5 miles south of there is the headquarters of the old T5 ranch that used to run cattle over this area. And there was a ranch house, there were stables. It was a big operation, the headquarters area, a couple of homes. Significant fact is there was a lot of crossing of the Eagle Chief right there by necessity. So Dick Oxley rides his horse to Augusta, spends the night, goes on the next day to Alva, to the Runny Mead Hotel, and goes to work. Try to visualize that. Now, if you will look, even today, it's rough terrain northward from that Eagle Chief point west of Clio. Of course, there are roads now, but at that time, there was not even an Indian trail. These scattered people were going to Alva by any means they could go. There was no exact road yet. He meandered through trees, sand hills. When he got to Augusta, he had to cross the Eagle Chief. As he went north to Tacoma, he had more intermittent streams to cross. What he did for food is a mystery. I imagine that it was in pretty good shape by the time he got to Alva. But that man roughed it going to Alva, where he worked. For 2 years, he maintained it. We may assume that he had a room someplace to stay in for periods of time. But there is the business now of creating these school districts. The first sign I found was in this 1894 newspaper that the Clio Eagle Chief published. And in it, they said, and I quote, "The county superintendent was in the Winoka area with the object of organizing a school district." Now, what does that mean to you? It means that county superintendent had to get on that horse and go out to Winoka, clear out to the west. This is an area that has to be covered by horseback, going place to place to place to find people who will serve on a school board, get it organized, and then submit their certificate. Think of all the time he spent working that M County, which is Woods, Alfalfa, and Major County. I can get in my car, I can drive to Alva in 45 minutes. way up in the corner up there, way past the Amarita, almost to the Kansas line. Clear down here to the Indian Territory at the bottom. Now, there were certain areas that were not settled yet that he couldn't go to. So, all he could do is go out and survey the situation and determine what was available. In March of '94, the Clio Eagle Chief said, "We ought to have a school. What's the matter with the county superintendent?" He lived just a quarter mile west of town. I don't know why they didn't just ask him, but that's the way the newspapers wrote. There's something to draw attention. Now, can I have slide number 6? Now, what I have done is charted the creation of the schools in M County. There is no pattern, there's no system that I can determine except he started out and he numbered, and then he went back later after contacting people in the field and getting the district organized, sit down with the paperwork and officially made it a school district. So the pattern that exists there has no rhyme or reason. Now, the weather, January and February, typical. We don't see the establishment of a school until March the 1st. Now, you say, oh, well, that would be Alva? No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was Lone Star down south of Alva. Maybe they had trouble getting the people together to have the election and elect the 3 men. It was always men then. 3 men before women's rights to serve on the school board. They in turn then had to lay out the district, draw up papers officially determining that they were the rightful school board, take that into Alva or put it in a cart and have it go to a railhead and get to Alva for Dick Oxley to review it, okay it, and certify it. At that point in time, he puts it on the books, and that establishes that date. So you see, some of them, like Fairview, would have to gone down to Homestead by horseback or cart, put it on the railroad. He gets on that railroad, he goes to Enid, he goes to Wichita, he comes back down to the Southern Kansas Railway to Alva. Otherwise, they would have had to have gotten on their horse and ridden to Alva. What I saw when I began to chart those, the first one was Lone Star south of town. The next one was Walnut Grove over near Winoka. Alva town site was number 3. Dick numbered Cleo Springs number 4, but he didn't get it certified that soon. He didn't get it certified until April the 12th for some reason. So over in April the 12th, we see that Cleo was the first major county school. Now, the The second one in Major County was Ringwood, and it followed up there, and I've accentuated the dark black are the Major County entries. What I see is there was a little bit of a pattern. The districts just east of Clio got certified early. And I could just see him. He got up one morning and got on his horse and headed east. He came to Glade, then Missionary. Now, he swung around to Ruby. But Ruby did not get certified for a long time after that. But he went ahead and got that done. And so here quickly is what happened. There's Clio, Ringwood, Glade, Oakdale. Now, Oakdale is near Walthall. Okay? If you go to Ringwood, just before you get to Indian Creek, you turn left and go up in there. That's Walthall, Ghost Town. Okay, for some reason, they got together and they got organized before these others. Vallow, which became Oriella. Elm Grove, which is 7 miles east of town, was next. The Deemer family, in volume 2 of the history book, I did a journal on the Deemer family, and they talk about that school and going to school and walking a distance to get to that school. Then Missionary, and then Gardenvale, which is Chester. And then finally, Fairview, which was way later, but I'll come to that in specifics. And one other. For some reason, he had about 4 or 5 districts in Major County that he just labeled unknown. Now, at the time that Fairview was created, which is clear over here, I think it's in May, was a school down in the corner of the county, way down in this corner, which he labeled unknown, district number 85. And the people called it the Williams School. And there was a man by the name of Mason Hoover who started that school back in 1893, before there was a district. He started getting kids in the area to come to his Saudi, and he started teaching ahead of time, just to get things going. Okay, slide number 8. I have to assume that Dick followed the old adage of having a school district 3 miles square. Now, the Oklahoma territorial government said to M County, you are to have a school in every township. A township is 6 miles square. There was this typical idea, a youngster could only walk 1.5 miles. So 1.5 miles one way and 1.5 miles another way, that's 3 miles. You take a township 6 miles square, divide it in 4, 3 miles square. Dick laid out all of M County in 3 mile squares. He laid out 224 districts and certified them, of a total of 289 districts in all of M County. 3 by 3, 3 by 3, 3 by 3. This, we're there, okay. is the present school district shown on the map at the museum. Dick laid it out, starting up in the corner, upper right-hand corner of section 13, 3 miles west to the west side of 15, south 3 miles. No, I'll beg your pardon. It was the center of 13 across to the center of the west side of 15. Then down 3 miles and back 3 miles. Its original District 84 was 3 by 3. Now, this was in 1894. And in 1894, there still wasn't but about 20 people in Fairview, of which there were only 3 children. One of the Floyds and the Montagues. Pete Martin had more kids than all of Fairview. Pete lived up in 22, upper 22. Then you got Bays, you got Ratzliff, you got Buller in there, Flassen. You've got farm families with kids. And that's why that was to be the school district. Now, Bill Cunningham was a very interested man in education. And so he donated his sod house in the southeast of the southwest of 23 for the schoolhouse, which is what we've designated as out here on State Road, just before you get to the Historical Society. If you, there's a parking lot on the west side of it. That road, just across the road to the west, right there, would be where the sod schoolhouse was. It was 50 foot long. It was a big sod house that he had built originally for his family, but he donated that for the schoolhouse. Then he went and built a frame house over on the west side of that quarter of his. That school remained the Fairview School till 1901. When the Orient Railroad came through and bought a right-of-way and platted Fairview in 1901, there was a scurry for town lots, speculators, the town grew, people brought kids. So immediately then, your population shifted to Fairview Townside. And they dissected the old 84 and gave it to Headlight, which was split up with Rusk, because there were kids, the Zimmermans, Peters, they had to cross the Eagle Chief to get to school. They had to wade through water to get to school. And that went on for years. 1894, Mr. Cunningham's brother, H.B. Cunningham, came down from Kansas and started teaching at that school. So until 1901, those kids east of the Sand Creek had to ford the creek to get, oh, I imagine they had a wagon or something. They must have figured out some way to get that bunch of kids across the water without having to wade through and get their shoes wet all the time. Some kids, the neighbor kids talked about taking their shoes off to save them till the wintertime. Walk barefooted, but not everybody did that. Well, we now can see that there was a shift in population that required a constant readjustment of these districts from 3 by 3 to different forms. And there were areas that were very late in getting established. Well, for example, if I could have that county map again, that one. Bethel School District. Look up here in that great big, that was just no man's land to Dick Oxley. That was what was left over. He made it number 217, Bethel. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13 miles long. You can't tell me a kid would walk 7 miles to school. There weren't very many kids out there, but surely there must have been a place where they could go to school. But it eventually, it cut up into, I think there's 8 different school districts now. But at that time, that's all he could do. So there were many situations that were unusual. And the school districts then, as they finally became established, were left, and at statehood, 1907, we split and became Major County, and we kept our numbering system. Alfalfa and Woods County changed their numbering system. One or the other renumbered, and they went through and they changed all the numbers, went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like that. I forget which one it was. Dick Oxley only served for 2 years. And for 2 years, he created those 220 districts. Now, my last slide is, I want you to just look at that. Can you visualize that man sitting in that hot Runny Mead hotel with a pen and a bottle of ink and writing all those legal descriptions, subsequently having to change them? This is the Fairview original. And he, a lawyer, in order to save time and make more money, instead of writing the word fence, he'll write TH. Boundary, he'll write BRY. The range T, 21, N, R, 10, West, just a W. Dick Oxley wrote out those words in full. There is another one, and I thought it was on this one until I pulled it. Instead of saying south, he wrote southward. You go southward. He wrote that all out. Think of all the time and energy spent to produce that. Now, we're talking about 224 of them. Needless to say, he earned a star in his crown for his 2 works, 2 years' work of duty. He went back to the farm in July. After his term had ended, he kept working. He kept working. He went back to the farm at Cleo, where he then farmed and taught school. He taught at Cheyenne Valley for a while. He got into politics. He became the Justice of the Peace for Cleo Springs. His claim to fame that he always bragged about, never mentioning the work he did on all these schools, was that he paneled an all-woman jury and had a trial before an all-woman jury, which was the first woman jury in Major County, no, in the state of Oklahoma, he said. Dick Oxley was famous for having an all-woman jury. Nothing said about all the work he did. Now, as I said, he was on the election board back in the beginning. In 1939, there was an argument in the Alva schools some way about the history. And they contacted him, and he was justice of the peace at that time. And he wrote this letter. I read part of the excerpt in which he stated about the two-county plan. He goes into some detail. It's a 4-page handwritten letter. But I wanted to read to you, if I can find it, what happened here. Matter of naming counties. The 3 political parties nominated a candidate for naming the county. The Republicans wanted Flynn. The Democrats wanted Bryan. The Populists, of which he was a member, wanted Woods. Woods received the largest vote, declared the name of the county. The name Woods was a mistake of the secretary of the committee. Oxley, secretary of the committee, thought Woods was the name of the man nominated instead of Wood, and the committee report was published that way. The committee, seeing the published report, called another meeting of the committee, and they decided to leave the S on Wood for euphony's sake. As far as I can find, it was the only mistake he ever made in his life. Dick Oxley. I hope you remember him. Thank you. Any questions, remarks?
So did he get paid to be the county superintendent?
Oh, yes.
So where'd that money come from at that time?
It had to start out from state appropriations because the tax system had not been established yet. Until January 1st, they couldn't have had an assessment at all. And then the taxes wouldn't come in till later. There never was anything said about salaries other than in my earlier presentation I told you about the territorial government said that the public system was going to be funded for county superintendents, and that the school district had to pay for their own school building and their own teacher because they would have a better understanding as to what the situation was. So if you lived out here in the west, you'll be able to out of Cedar. If you're over east, you'll be able to Saudi. And they hired teachers wherever they could get them. Some of these teachers didn't get $15 a month. And you know, it's strange. The public education system started in colonial days. There was no money then for a school. It was all subscription. If you had 2 kids, they would assess you an amount for each child. But the teacher would get like $15 a month back in colonial days. There was no money, so you got paid in tobacco. Tobacco was the monetary. And I found a will in the 1600s in which this man willed his land and he specifically accepted for the construction of a schoolhouse that was 2 rooms, one for the school and one for the teacher. Back in colonial days. We've come a long way. So Major County then, in 1947, the state law caused consolidation to where we only had a few schools left, of which Progressive, Bob was the superintendent out there, left. Basically, that and Ringwood, Clio, and Fairview. Cheyenne Valley was still. You have a question, Rick?
How did they do the names of the schools? I mean, did the communities get to choose a name? Or, I mean,
I can't find out who did that.
I'm just curious.
Well, I think he did. Why would we have some just unknown? Why wouldn't he have said to the school board, you find a name, name it Kane, the Kane Bunch, whatever, but name it. It was unknowns. In the book, I've named them just for identification because I had trouble with more than one school in trying to tell you about it and ferreting out those facts. Geraldine did a wonderful job of collecting information, but I had to go through and pick and put it all in one spot in order to kind of get it organized. I want us to be able to walk to a place and get an answer real quick without having to spend a lot of time out there. But I don't find anything on the naming. There are several names. Sternberg, they named it after Mr. Sternberg, just lived up the road, like that. This unknown school down here in the corner of the county, they called Williams for years because it was on the Williams Quarter. But it was registered as unknown. Even though Mr. Hoover had been conducting school there. I don't know why they didn't name it Hoover. That would have been a good name. You know, we don't know a lot of things that happen, and that's why I want to do this. I want to put all this hypothesis before you to dwell on. Any other questions? Any questions about Fairview? Mr. Vogt.
How did they decide where to put the schoolhouse at in those 3 miles or whatever?
Well, you put it in the center.
It always had to be in the center.
You try to put it in the center. You try to give each child equal rights, half, 1 1/2. You put it over on this side, that boy would have to go 3 miles. Let's get a step out the door. Incidentally, there was one school district that was just 2 miles northwest of Alva. It wasn't even a full 3x3, and it was late in getting to town to get their paperwork before Oxley.
Was the land confiscated basically?
I'm sorry, Rick.
Was the land confiscated basically from the, to have that school in the middle of the 3 miles? I mean, did they just, or was it done before all this? I just wonder how did they get to, in the middle?
There's nothing that says that it shall be done thus and so. Most of the people were pro-education,
So they just asked them basically.
and they would donate a piece of the ground. In I can't think of what year it was, there was a study made of rural schools. And they talked about the location of the schoolhouse. And it made me find that in many places, there would be a spot that wasn't good for farming. He'd give it for school. Now, like Cunningham, he donated his soddy house and then went and built a frame house. So there's different reasons for it. the object was to try to get it in the center, and I just assumed that these three men prevailed on this guy to let him build a house. I have run the county records on every one of these schools. And I would say probably a third of them are deeded. There was a deeding an acre of land for the school. In this study in the 1920s, they said that it should be at least an acre of land so that a child would have room to play at recess time, room for 2 outdoor toilets. There was quite a study made on the terrain, that it should be high so that the children wouldn't have to play in the mud and things like that. But in 1894, I don't think they gave any consideration to things like that. Boy, if you had a piece of ground, let's just use it. Any more questions? That's about all I've got.
So generally, this school was located, it was on a mile line, then it was like a mile and a half over. In other words, the 3 square miles were on half-mile lines.
Yes.
Is that how that was?
You got a 3 mile by 3
It wasn't in the
miles
middle of the section.
square,
Yeah.
and the school would be in the middle of the section, would be in the second tier, in the middle section down in the corner, and try to get to the middle as possible.
Like Progressive, it's on that intersection there.
Yeah.
So it would have been a mile and a half south, mile and a half west. That would have been kind of.
Why they wound up with Bob? You know
I
history?
think that's what it was, but in 1947 is when there was a lot of consolidation, like he mentioned, and it was at that time that the Peerless School, one on the Homestead Blacktop, and the Banner School were moved into the Progressive location.
But was that progressive location there on the corner?
Well, yeah, the Progressive location, that was
The original corner,
Progressive
okay.
school, yes.
So they moved other.
Theoretically,
buildings
that's the
to
middle of
that.
the square.
What now?
They moved some other buildings to that.
Yeah.
We moved, they moved 2 buildings, the Banner Building and the Peerless
disbanded there, they
Building to
donated.
that location.
They donated the buildings, they disbanded, so they donated the buildings to
Yeah,
consolidate, or whatever.
I think 47 was when they limited the size of the schools. You had to have a certain amount of students, and that's what caused a lot of consolidations at that time.
You know why they consolidated? So the bus companies could sell them buses. The invention of the bus started consolidation, and they lobbied to get legislation for consolidation so that they could haul kids. The old Ford truck, put siding on the bed and made a bus out of it. And that's how it started.
I think that the Progressive District ended up with about 14 rural districts in it.
Yeah.
And actually some from Blaine County came in, part of the Homestead came in.
Why progressive? Because of you?
I know.
Did you politic? Was there any background into doing that, or did they just, let's just go to progressive?
I think because we probably had a lower tax base, we had a lot of good land within our district, and
There you are. Money.
Yeah.
and they liked to put the land where they had to pay the least taxes.
Yeah. That makes sense. Nothing wrong with it. Okay.
Another point here, we were called D10, the D stands for dependent districts, which meant that they were dependent on some other district for a high school. That's the way that the D designation was.
So Fairview's it was independent.
I is independent.
Yeah.
Yeah, independent.
I 84 or something.
See, Fairview has remained independent all this time. It's never changed from the original filing.
It was 84 then, huh? The district was 84 when it was filed.
26.
The district was 84 when it was filed, huh?
That originally it was 84, it's been all this way, never changed.
Take a look at the screen.
Oh, how'd you do that?
I have the book on the computer.
Well, what? See, there's that technology again. What I thought about to add that is an area of research that we need to expand, and that's the German school. I wrote about it in the history book. It was an afterthought. I was done with the book, and Walt Bartell died, and in his obituary, he mentioned going to the German school. And my mind said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And I went to work and researched as much as I could and squeezed it in. George let me add it to the end of the book. When the Mennonite element came in the original runs, there was enough of them that when they went to this school that had been created by my buddy Dick Oxley, they couldn't talk English. They knew no English. And the main purpose of this school was to teach English and writing. That's what the territorial government said. You get a school established and teach them how to read a little bit and to sign their name. Well, everybody wanted to be able to sign their name, so you could get a deed and could sign it. So that was what they would have. Couldn't speak English. So, I don't know who, it's good for research, somebody got the notion, let's find one of these ladies who has gotten to normal, who can speak German. And in the off season, because most of your schools were conducted 3 and 4 months of the year, and the rest of the time the kids had to work in the field, plowing, shocking oats, working. So there was an off season in the summertime, and the school was sitting vacant. So this teacher, this bilingual teacher, would gather those children and they would have German school. And several progressive did it. I had a list of several people, but there are many more, I know, if we could just find them. But what Walt was talking about was the Mennonite Brethren established a school right here south of town. The building still exists on the west side of town. The Penners bought it and used it for the Penner Church over on about 2nd Street. It's sitting over there right now. It was the German church. And there was a man that came over from Europe and went to Southwestern and got his education. It came up, and he was the teacher that taught there. And students would go to that school, and then they may go from there on up some more courses in the Fairview School or go to a church school. And that's what he was talking about. But these little school things that happen spontaneously around the county need to be chased down and put together. Go on. Anybody want to do that?
I was really fascinated by the beautiful handwriting. that-
Yes. I was too, Betty. You and I are alike. To stop and think of all the time it would take. Doesn't he ever get impatient?
Yeah.
Doesn't he ever
It's
get
just
bored?
beautiful handwriting, where lots of times I don't have kids in school, but I understand they're not teaching writing anymore in some of these places that they can't read.
I spent 2 years.
Yeah, that's beautiful handwriting.
I spent 2 years putting all this down in longhand, and then I couldn't read my handwriting, and I had to go back to the courthouse and check it again to figure out what I wrote. Glad you came, Bob. Anything else? Anybody have a?
Do you know, what was the, like in the 1800s and like that when they first started, what was the requirement for a teacher? I mean, education, what was their requirement?
Well, they had to be able to do the same things they could teach the kids.
That's basically it.
Yeah.
I mean,
The official statement in the Organic Act, for which the territorial government was created, said that they had to complete a course at an institution.
like either
Normal.
normal school.
They created normal to meet that requirement. The government probably was thinking you need to go to college or something like that. But they beat that, they just opened up normal, which was in a church in Alva. All these people went to Alva
So,
and it was a church.
so then there was an institution that they needed to, they had to go to that normal school to be a,
They had to take courses in English and writing. There was a list of things they were required to do that they didn't do, and they got certified because it was too onerous. But some of these teachers lived in a wagon, some lived in a tent. They could get by on $1 a month in food expense to go to normal out of which then, of course, by statehood, it became Northwestern State. But that's where it started. And Fairview had one too.
So I thought Fairview.
So you could conduct one and just get some people. They brought people from Stillwater over to teach class. And they had it in the school building, the public school building, the normal school. We got a picture of it somewhere. Well, excuse me. Yeah, Betty, I'll tell you that they don't teach penmanship like that anymore.
No.
What are you taking notes for, Donnie?
So I'll remember this stuff. I'm a teacher. That's what you just do.
Just get a copy of that.
Yeah, I need to get a copy of that.
Technology. George got it all right there. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I was afraid nobody would bother to come.